Hello, and the warmest of welcomes to episode 6 of Not If, But When, the podcast which answers all the questions you've ever had about all things funeral and many of the ones which may never even have occurred to you. My name is Kirstie Atherton. I'm an independent celebrant based in the Northwest.
And I'm Lyndsey Conquest. I'm also an independent celebrant based in Bedfordshire. Welcome to episode 6, To Burn or Not to Burn. Now, before we go any further with today's episode, we really need to talk about this title.
Yes. Okay, so you're not the person who came up with this title, Lyndsey, are you?
No, I am
No,
not.
you are not. Oh, and I know that we've had lots of debate about whether to stick with this title that I suggested or not. Um, yeah, can you tell me what happened to you when you read the title?
I sort of just like recoiled a bit. It's just like, and I saw it and I was like, okay, I need to talk to Kirstie about this title. And then obviously there was another side of me that said, well, this is why we're doing this. We're doing this to get sort of people talking about death, dying, funerals, and some of those uncomfortable words and terms that we all struggle with that make it so much more difficult for us to talk about death, dying, and funerals. And one of those for me is the acceptance that if you are cremated, you are in fact going to be burnt. And that idea for me is still a little bit of a struggle because I'm still undecided on how I want my body to be disposed of after
Yeah,
death. And I have a very big fear of fire. So the mixture together when just having the title To Burn or Not to Burn just freaked me out a little bit, if I'm honest. And I think it might freak other people out as well.
yes, I think it might too. And I think that we have deliberately then kept it, haven't we, for
Yeah.
that reason, because I think it's all well and good us sitting here kind of banging on from our soapbox about, facing these things when obviously there are things still about death and dying and funeral that make us a little bit twitchy because we are humans too. So we deliberately kept that in for that reason, didn't we? To show that,
Definitely.
it's there are certain things that, we still have problems with as well. Um, when we do our episodes for Dying Matters Week, we're going to culminate in an episode all about the language around death, dying, and funerals. And so we'll have a bit more of a deep dive into that. Yeah. So how do you feel now we've gone with it, Linz? Are you okay?
I'm okay. And I think I'd
Good.
just like to say to those people who are listening, who really had to get past the same struggles as I
Oh.
did to press the play button. Thank you. Thank you for sticking with us because I think it's a really important thing that we're doing here. And it's just, yeah. And I will be making sure that I plug on social media for the people that are a little bit scared of the title to just have a listen. Of course, there
Yeah.
will be the ones that will be really intrigued by the title and will be. I wonder whether there'll be more up north or down south. We'll have to do a poll afterwards, won't
Oh,
we,
I
and
wonder
find
if we're going
out.
to have a north-south divide with the
Mm.
straight talkers and the not.
Yeah.
That's an interesting one. It will also be interesting to see with your technological skills where you are able to look at all the analytics and know how many people have listened and how long they listen for and all that, whether actually anybody does listen to it because they might look at the
Yeah.
title and think, oh, and if that happens, then I abdicate all responsibility for titles to you.
Thanks. Uh, okay, right. So now that little digression is out of the way, let's get back onto it. So, Kirsty, do you have something life affirming that you'd like to share with us?
Indeed, I do, my lovely friend. So I'm back again banging on about serendipity. It's this perennial mystery, isn't it, that regularly pops up for both of us. And I know you and I have often felt that we were meant to do someone's funeral, that there was some connection between us and the person that we've been invited to honour. So I had a really practical example of this in being asked to do a funeral by someone who'd heard me speak at one of my dead positive talks. It wasn't going to be an easy send off for the family for many, many different reasons. But the client was really open with me about how helpful it had been that she'd already seen me and she'd already seen the way that I work under a different circumstance, but she'd found it really reassuring to think of me as somebody who could help when that loss arrived, and to have already got that knowledge that I was just a person like her, and and she'd followed me on socials and got an idea of the kind of attitudes that I have, and yeah, that I felt that was really life affirming and affirming for work as well.
Yeah, that's lovely. Yeah, to know that you made that impact on her when her or him, sorry, was it a he or she? I
Yeah,
can't remember.
it
Yeah.
was a her. It
Uh-huh.
was a talk, a dead positive that I'd done for a WI locally.
Oh,
Yeah,
lovely. Yeah,
yeah,
and
it was
that
lovely.
goes to show, isn't it, all that work that we do, extra work in the community and just getting out there and people
Yeah,
seeing us, it helps. It helps them sort of get to know us, and
it really
it's
does.
always easier to have a friendly face at a time where you're facing the loss of a loved one and planning their
Yeah,
funeral and things.
yeah, it really is, isn't it? Yeah.
Mm.
So, what about you, my love? What affirmed the joy in your life since last we checked in?
I think one moment that comes to mind is, well, it's a few moments when I've been witnessing my friend continuing to spread awareness and raise money for charity, even after the devastating loss of her husband. Now,
Oh,
I am going to name them because I know that she won't mind. So Emily and Sai had always been a team, particularly when it came to their passion for supporting brain tumor research. In the midst of her grief, Emily has continued the charitable work that had been so important to both her and Sai.
oh,
And despite the immense pain she is experiencing, she, I suppose, resolved to honour his memory by carrying on the legacy of spreading that vital message and raising money for much needed research into brain tumour research. And it's just been, yeah, amazing, life affirming to just see her work and the work of her other friends as well, who are running marathons and various other
wow.
things at the moment to continue that target to nearly £50,000 now.
What? Oh my gosh.
Yeah,
Well, I don't know Emily and I didn't know Sai, but yeah, absolutely massive big up to Emily from here as well. That's really impressive. Isn't it astonishing when you actually properly experience firsthand how like resilient people are, like
yeah,
how much they can be carrying that weight and then that baggage and that burden, because it often feels like a burden, doesn't it?
mm,
But can carry on and can, achieve and celebrate that love in a different way. So good
yeah,
on Emily. Yeah,
yeah,
impressive.
yeah. It's fab, isn't it? So,
It is.
right, shall we get on to today's topic?
Well, shall we, since now we've scared everybody with the title?
Yeah. So really the topic is about disposal. We're talking about disposal, and it seems like an incongruous word to use in relation to human beings. But you know that whilst we'll always discuss these things with you as gently as we can, we are both absolutely committed to using the honest wording. And that's what we're talking about here. Now, of course, everyone has entirely different ideas and beliefs about the end of life, but one thing which we can say with confidence is that a human body, the shell within which we have breathed our earthly years, is a finite thing. It ages, gets ill, it suffers injury, and ultimately, one day it will no longer be capable of housing whatever else it is that we all are. So we're not being flippant using the term disposal. It's just the standard term we use, and it solely relates to this outer shell.
Yeah, exactly that. And it's really well worth clarifying, though, that just because the essence of the person, whatever else it is that makes them who they are, makes us who we are, is no longer present, then that in no way lessens the respect and the dignity with which they're treated by those whose responsibility it is to care for them prior to the disposal. One of the first things that I was struck by when training was the way in which crematorium staff spoke about the people that they care for. And I found it actually really moving, and that it really affirmed for me that yes, this was a path that I needed to take too.
Yeah, I agree that seeing the staff and how they work and how they
Yeah.
feel about their work and the compassion and the
Yeah.
interest they show in the people's lives, and
Oh,
it's
absolutely.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, they always have questions, don't they? When
yeah,
if you're in the back, as it were, with them, and they'll say, "Oh, I didn't know that about it's really
yeah,
nice, isn't it? It
yeah.
brings them to
Yeah,
life, doesn't it?
it
Yeah.
does. Yeah, yeah. So
Yeah.
okay, so let's start with cremation then.
Yes,
So let's start with what cremation is. It's the process of using flame to reduce a human body to ashes.
it
That
is
is
exactly
that.
that.
So it may seem like a modern practice, but it isn't, is it, Kirsty? It actually dates back a
Yeah.
long time, to 1885 in the UK.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
exactly right. Yeah. Yeah, and when it was introduced, I think it's really interesting because we're going to go on to talk about sort of some of the potential modern things that are going to overtake from cremation in
yeah,
the future, and people's reactions to the thought of those. But it's interesting to note that people didn't react brilliantly to this when it was
no,
introduced in Victorian England. Um, it was very, very slow to catch on. So I think in the first year they only did one, and then in the
wow,
second year, it was literally two or three. I mean, it wasn't, people were not queuing up for this to happen. People were thinking, ugh, we don't do this. This is not our culture.
yeah,
So it only really became embedded in society, really in our society during the First World War. And now it is the most common form of disposal for a human body. If we include direct cremation, it's 78% of
so
all
yeah,
people.
big number,
Yeah, it
big
is. It's
number.
absolutely huge. Yeah, I mean, I know we've spoke about this before. Sometimes it's just the automatic go-to, isn't it? It's just the first thing
Mm,
that comes to mind to people that that's what you do. Um, but I suppose that's what today's episode is about, is looking
yeah,
at, the fact that there are other options, there are other things that can be done. Um, so, there's pros and cons, like there is to everything, isn't there, with flame cremation.
yeah,
Um, Has to be done
yeah,
at very high temperature, understandably, and cremators are gas powered largely and have enormously complicated filtration systems to filter out some of the toxic things that we carry in our body. Most notably with older people, mercury in fillings, which obviously is something
yeah.
that's going to sort of phase itself out really because it's not used in that way anymore.
Mhm.
So I guess that's the first con, really, is the environmental impact of it. It has a huge carbon footprint.
Definitely. I think, yeah, although they do everything they can with these sort of fancy filtration systems and
Yeah,
everything, it's they can only make it, to a certain degree of environmentally friendly, and
yeah,
that they do the best that they can. But yeah, it's
yeah.
a definite thing to consider is the impact on the environment, isn't it?
It is, and nearly all types of disposal. We'll go on to talk about this a bit later. Nearly all types of disposal will have some form of emission of
Yeah.
CO2, but cremation is by far the largest, and basically it's about 250 kilograms of CO2 per cremation, which means nothing to me, but somebody has very kindly translated that. And it's basically the equivalent of driving your average petrol car for about 600 miles. So it's not nothing.
Wow. No,
Yeah.
it's not nothing, is it? No.
Yeah. But we do widely accept it as the norm, don't we? And one of the really
Yeah.
positive things people like about it is that it is considerably cheaper than a burial.
Considerably cheaper, I think, especially
Yeah.
now because burial space is just getting so limited, and
Yeah.
as that burial space gets more limited, the prices go up because it is land, and land is expensive. And I think that's
Absolutely.
a fair point there, and that's why one of the biggest reasons why cremation is so much more cheaper than burial. I
Yeah.
did read actually, Kirsty, that there. Now I should have written this down, but there was a cemetery in London, and a space for a burial there was something in the region of, I think it was £9,500.
Wow.
It was
Just for the
just
burial.
an astonishing figure.
Yeah.
Part of my mind is even thinking it might have been 19. It was a figure that just literally really blew my mind, but
Yeah.
you know. But then I realized that, yeah, land is expensive now, and
Yeah.
that's what we're doing, isn't it? We're buying a piece of land for something quite very special,
Yeah.
you know, for a long, long time. So yeah, it's
Yeah, it's a really interesting one, isn't it? Because I think there's a real difference between um, really built up urban areas
mm,
and areas with more space effectively. I was really annoyed with myself because I wish I had written this down because I was reading something a long time ago about natural burials and about people being concerned about lack of space and running out of space,
mm,
and it was some kind of really astonishing figure about, it would take us the next 2000 years to fill up even, like, I think it was 25% of the land that's put aside um, by farmers every
yeah,
year. So I mean, that there is plenty of land to do it on. It's just, where is that land situated,
yeah.
isn't it? And I know
It's
some
more
of the
going down the natural burial route, I suppose.
exactly. So your traditional burial in a like a municipal cemetery, yeah, that space is really, really limited. So very close to me, the for burials, the Victorian cemetery where the crematorium is full. So they actually acquired some land, which is the playing fields of the school that I went to high school at, which actually closed and was amalgamated with another school. And they have created a new cemetery there, has a completely different feel. It's very nice, has a
Mm.
completely different feel to the traditional one, and people do not like it. Do not
Right,
like it at
okay.
all. No,
Wow.
it's very different.
Right.
People are used to that very old kind of Victorian vibe and those really kind of ancient graves that are,
Yeah.
weather worn and
Yeah.
mossy, and obviously in a brand new one, there's none of that. So
No.
yeah, interesting.
Mm.
Um, People seem to react differently to cremation, I always think, than burial, though. I know your reaction to cremation is quite visceral. It's a real,
Yes.
yeah, you
Y
feel
y
it, don't you?
yeah, yeah. But I don't know. I think I I have noticed, I find that there are some families that when they attend burial, they really struggle with that visual of the coffin being
Yeah, the lowering.
lowered.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, and I suppose you don't really see that generally in cremation, but I do know there are crematoriums that have catafalques that do lower. So the
Yeah.
catafalque being the sorry everyone, the catafalque being the platform that the coffin is placed onto essentially. Traditionally the curtains would close around it, but in some of the modern ones, it is lowered. The coffin is
Mm.
lowered from the catafalque, so it gives that lowering kind of impression. But yeah, people do have a reaction to that. It's almost like the part of it that they don't want to think about,
Yeah.
the really, really not think about. But,
Yeah.
it's become a tradition for lots and lots of families, and it's,
It
it's
has.
the go-to, isn't it?
It
Um,
is. Yeah.
yeah, so
But then obviously as well, they've, you know, it's the tradition with families, but then they've got this sort of complication, I suppose, of deciding what they do with the ashes once they get them back.
yes. Yeah, and it's a whole other can of worms, isn't it? How many
Mm.
houses have you been into where you've been told where grandma is, or which wardrobe somebody's in, or
Yeah, yeah,
it's like
definitely.
every street in the country must have two or three houses on that have got at least
Yeah,
one set of ashes in.
yeah.
Yeah, that's a big decision, isn't it? There's a huge number of people who never collect ashes either, which
I know
really
that. Yeah,
did that
surprised
shock
me.
you? Yeah, well, that was one of
Mm.
the things that shocked me most. That particularly like long established funeral directors will very often have almost like an attic full of
Yeah,
ashes that people
yeah.
haven't come back for. And I just find that
Mm.
astonishing, really. But um, yeah, and the other thing that kind of people tend to give negative feelings about in terms of cremation is some of those myths that keep going. Like people who'll say, well, you've no guarantee that those ashes are your person. So can we just
Yeah.
say now there is, they are.
Yes.
Don't worry
Yeah.
about it. Yeah.
100% they are. Yeah, the process is very thorough and yeah.
Yeah.
So
And
we can
absolutely foolproof, isn't it?
absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So the other one that sometimes people say is that various bodies are kind of put in together, and so your ashes would be mixed with somebody else, we can categorically say that that is not true either.
No, yeah,
Apart from
absolutely.
apart from the fact that it's absolutely a horrible thought and wouldn't happen, and nobody I have ever met who works in a crematorium would stand for anything like that. You
No,
literally couldn't fit more than one in anyway,
no,
could you?
you couldn't.
Even
You
if you really
couldn't.
tried.
Yeah, we have both had tours, haven't we, around our local crematoriums,
We
and
have.
been shown sort of the processes and the cremators, and yeah, we can assure you that these myths, they need to be thrown out the window. They're not anything to worry about.
Yeah, they are just myths. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. But obviously, there are those cons to cremation. And if those cons are just too conny for you and you do want an alternative, well, the obvious first choice, as we've mentioned already, is burial. And that's the way in our society that we've been disposing of bodies since forever. And I
yeah,
suppose now we're in a different situation where we have two kind of distinct forms of burial, don't we? We have the traditional in the kind of municipal cemeteries that we were talking about, and we have natural burials.
yeah.
So yeah. Um yeah. Now I don't know what's the situation like around you with natural burial grounds, Lyndsey. Do you have many?
Yeah, we're quite lucky actually, although I know one of them, which was sort of one, the first, is is almost full. Or
Oh
a
wow.
year ago I was told it was almost full, but I think that they've managed to get some more land, and I think
Yeah.
that they're now working on sort of some more space becoming available, and they've
Yeah.
definitely opened up some space for ashes to be buried
Yes.
there and for trees to be planted.
That's
But we've
nice.
got a couple of others that are both really lovely, one more local to me, and then we've got one a bit further that has actually got a ceremony space as well, which I think is really special.
Yeah.
Haven't had an opportunity to conduct a funeral there yet, but they've got a really nice sort of wooden gazebo where you can actually
Mm.
hold the service, and then you make your way to the graveside for the burial.
Yeah. It's a
But
really
yeah,
different feel, isn't it?
yeah. How about you?
Yeah.
What have you got locally to you?
Yeah, we've got a couple of absolute belters. Yeah, we really have. And very varied. So I'd say within half a mile drive of me, we've got a wildflower meadow, which and that has a wooden gazebo,
Mhm.
where you can do your um service on site and then the burial in the wildflower meadow. It's quite small, to be honest. It's not huge, and I don't know if there is much scope to expand that one. So that's probably more of a kind of finite option, I would guess. We have one which is fabulous and is kind of potentially winning for me at the moment as my choice, my place of
Right.
choice. Um, and it's actually part of a chain, and it's a chain that's throughout the country, and it's beautiful. It's got the most gorgeous chapel, proper traditional kind of modern version of a traditional chapel. And interestingly, and it's in the center of this natural burial ground, interestingly, I have done services there, a number of services there, but every service I've done there has actually been a cremation. It's been
Right.
somebody who just loves the place and the feel of the place, but we're still going for cremation anyway. But so you do have the option to use the chapel and not use the burial ground.
Yeah.
And the other one that's within about half a mile of me that is particularly interesting is it's just outside Winsford in Cheshire. It's called Swanlow Park. And it's just got the best story to it. So essentially there's a man there whose family have farmed for generations. As he came up to retirement, he announced to his family that he wanted to convert part of the land into a cemetery. So as you
Right.
go in, the first part is like a traditional cemetery. It's got rows of headstones, and you can do burials and interment of ashes there. But as you drive through that bit, you get to a little gate where there is just the most enchanting woodland. It's gorgeous. And
Oh,
last time I went there, which to be fair is probably a year ago, they were on their second expansion. And the really good thing about it is they own that entire farm. There is a lot of land there. And
Right.
as it carries on, they open more bits up. They kind of give over more of the land to that cause, and it's fabulous. It's absolutely
Oh,
beautiful.
lovely. Yeah, that sounds
Yeah.
lovely.
Yeah, it really is. So lots of pros, I would say, to natural burial
Yeah,
grounds,
definitely.
but also lots of pros to burial. This it actually, to some people, as we've said before, might feel more comforting than the idea of somebody being cremated, somebody being
Yeah.
burned.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's much less emissions. It's not carbon neutral, obviously, because although, to be fair, at most of the natural burial grounds, if you are particularly keen for the burial to be carbon neutral, they do offer the opportunity for the grave to be hand dug rather than dug by a digger.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah,
interesting. I
yeah, I
wonder
know.
whether I didn't know that that's an option. I wonder whether that's something that's
Yeah,
available locally to me as well.
I'd
I'll have to
imagine
find out.
so. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I'm not sure about the one which is like part of a group. I'm not sure about that one, but I know that independent ones give that option and they can
Right.
provide. I believe it's actually um, firemen on the days off.
Oh,
Firemen
really?
occasionally, yeah, they occasionally,
Okay.
because they're so poorly paid, have to
Yeah.
on their days off
Oh,
have like another
gosh.
job. Yeah,
That's awful, isn't it? But it's
isn't
good
it?
that it's an option for
Yeah,
the environmental impact. But
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Not and obviously good for the health of the firefighters or whoever it
Yeah,
is that's doing it.
yeah.
But then obviously the massive the massive elephant in the purse in this situation is the cost.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
It
a
does
lot
cost
more
more.
expensive. I think I was looking at sort of areas and cemeteries local to me, and one local authority run one. The cheapest I could find was nearly £1,800 for a single depth burial plot.
Right, right. I think very often as well, people shy away from having a single plot because if they think if we're if we're putting out the cash to buy this, we
Yeah,
want to be able to put more than one person into
yeah,
it. So yeah,
yeah.
so that's a consideration. The other
Hmm.
consideration is lease as well, isn't it? Because
Yeah,
you are not actually buying that piece of land to keep as yours in your family forever and ever and ever. You are essentially buying that burial plot, usually for 99 years.
yeah,
The idea being that by that point, there'd be nobody left to be tending that grave, particularly
yeah,
anyway. And I know there's a lot of talk at the moment about reusing graves and reopening graves that
yeah.
are, over a particular age. And, I suppose that would be a con to some people as well. I might just think they just don't
Yeah.
like the thought of that happening.
Yeah, and I
Yeah.
think I wanted to sort of just point out something that's changed in our local authority run cemetery is that they're now using shorter plots. Now that sounds a bit confusing to say how would they do that, but obviously
Mm,
they're almost sort of layering the plot. So the first the first row is deeper, and
yeah.
then the area that you were able to put a gravestone or a memorial of some type on is now half the length to what they would normally have allowed you to. So it's no longer a full,
Uh,
it no longer looks like a full length grave from the
oh,
top, because you
okay.
can only actually put a stone or memorial half the length. And
Yeah.
that will then allow them to dig then shallower, the next one along. So
Yeah.
it's not like they're not putting one person on top of the other. They're just
Yeah.
being very, very careful with how they use the space.
Yeah.
But I
Yeah.
think it's just being mindful that these things are in place in some areas now, and just double checking that when you get your paperwork and you're booking your
Yes.
plot, to make sure you're happy with what you're able to do afterwards in terms of a
Yeah.
headstone or a monument of some type, memorial.
Yeah, absolutely. And also on that point, checking what the regulations are around reopening graves, because
Yeah,
I know there's a lot of issues around who owns that grave. And if that person is no longer available to be consulted about it being reopened, there is very often controversy over that. And
yeah.
it's just asking those questions in advance, isn't it? Like we always say, to kind of mitigate against sort of having any unpleasant shocks at some point in the future where you think, oh, I didn't realize that was going to happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, just having those
Yeah.
conversations, as we
Yeah.
always say, Lynn, don't we?
Yeah, that's it. Have the
We do.
conversation. And right, so obviously, as we mentioned earlier, prior to 1885 in this country, cremation seemed entirely alien. It was a brand new, newfangled idea which would surely never ever catch on.
No, never.
No, but now it feels perfectly normal and
Yeah.
none of us bat an eyelid. So, although I'm still undecided, but I just wonder how long it would take for the newfangled ideas in the pipeline to catch on and become the norm too.
I know, it's really interesting, isn't it?
Mm.
And although I am, weird about technology, as we often have mentioned, I am not weird about this technology. I find it fascinating. Just like
Yeah.
in every other corner of life, tech moves on and new ideas get introduced, and they eventually become something that we can barely remember life before, like smartphones or Costa or really
Yeah.
good lycra in clothes. I mean, remember
Yeah.
those bad old baggy days?
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, like you are, about how long that's going to take for these disposal technologies to become normal. When we're talking about new technologies, essentially, really, what we're talking about is the future of disposal becoming much less impactful than the traditional flame cremation we're now used to. So that's the real move ahead.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. We're really talking here about two methods which are becoming much more widely available in other countries and which we're likely to soon catch up on. So our first is resumation and the second is human composting. Now, I know the first sounds super futuristic, and the second sounds like it would really, really put people off. Again, the term human composting freaks me out as much as to burn or not to burn, but actually, it's something I am really, really interested in. So, Kirsty, perhaps you
Yeah.
could explain a little bit more about what they are.
Yeah, absolutely. So if we start with resumation, sometimes it's referred to as aquamation, but the actual kind of scientific term for the process that you go through in that is alkaline hydrolysis. Essentially, it's a way of disposing bodies using water as opposed to flame. So bodies are put into a chamber, which looks very similar to a flame cremator. Um, and then in that chamber, they go through a process of highly heated alkaline water being added in. And eventually they are reduced to an ash, which is like a real pure white ash, unlike the kind of grey ash that we used to with flame cremation. Now, this is a bit of a last minute add in here because I contacted somebody who represents one of the organizations that are kind of I was going to say spearheading, figureheading. What do I mean? They're heading up the kind of the push for
Yeah, I
resumation
get what you
in this
mean. Yeah.
country, and they only replied to me yesterday, so I am able to
Ah,
tell you. Currently, no, it is still not available in the UK, although it is available in places in Europe and in the United States. In 2023, the co-op, interestingly, announced that they were working towards um, providing resumation in the UK. But so far, there has been no other announcement about any progress that's been made there. The Scottish government, who in a lot of death and dying ways do tend to be a little bit more forward thinking, they have launched a consultation. Which is currently happening about how people feel about the introduction of resumation, and that we are awaiting sort of the feedback from that. So that's just a bit of a last minute kind of add in there. I know we haven't had a chance to discuss that with each other yet,
no.
um, but it was an interesting one. I asked about location and I asked about cost because that
Hmm.
really matters to people. There's no confirmation about where these will be located, if they are actually, or when they are actually introduced, because they will have to be. There will have to be another option at some point. But the reassuring thing was that the person who responded to my questions, who works in this field, said that there is an expectation that it won't be any different to the price of flame cremation, which I
Oh,
thought was
okay.
really interesting
Yeah.
because I just imagined it's a newfangled thing. Oh, I bet it'll be really expensive. Not at
Yeah.
all.
Yeah. That's what I
Yeah.
expected.
Yeah. So how do you feel about it, Lind? What do you think about the kind of the pros and the cons of the
I,
summation?
I, do you know what? I honestly just don't know how I feel about it personally.
Yeah.
It's a difficult one. I think I would be interested to find out more about it when it's available in this country,
Yeah.
and maybe even go and visit
Yeah, I'd
the
love to do that.
premises. I mean,
Mm.
obviously it's better for the environment,
Yes.
um, which is has got to be a positive, but
Yeah.
I just, yeah, personally, I'm not sure. It's interesting that it'll be the same price or similar pricing, so that
Hmm.
sort of takes away one of my sort of concerns with it. But what
Yeah.
what about you? How do you feel on it?
Yeah. Now, at first, I thought, oh, that's really exciting because obviously, you know, that I'm particularly interested in the kind of, you know, the least impactful ways of doing things.
Mhm.
So, doing a bit of a deep dive on it, it actually uses a fifth of the energy of flame cremation. So, obviously, that's loads less, but it's still not
Yeah,
nothing. Um, the thing I think that probably will freak people out about it is the idea that all that volume of water that's used, it comes out at a level of purity that just can be returned to the water cycle. And I
yeah,
think that freaks people out.
yeah,
Um, the massive positive of it is that there are no airborne emissions from it. So that's really good. I
yeah,
suspect it will be something that will perhaps take longer to catch on or catch on less enthusiastically than actually human composting,
yeah.
which is what we're going to go on to talk to. That's my
Yes, and
feeling about
this
it.
is
But
something I'm excited about actually,
yes,
really, a
me
lot
too.
more than I thought I would be. But the more I look into it, the more
Yes.
positive I feel about it. So, yeah, human composting. So, what else can we call it,
Well, we
Kirsty?
need to call it something else, don't we? Because it's not going to
Yeah.
catch on being called that.
Yeah.
Calling it human composting, I think, just gives you the vision of plastic bags of people in a garden centre. That's the
Yes.
and I think we need to get away from that. But yeah, it does have a proper name. It's called terramation. Um, which in a way kind of like makes it sound better, but also kind of makes it sound worse.
Yeah.
Because obviously, you know, terra meaning land or earth, but also does give you the vibe of terror meaning terrified. So so little swings and roundabouts there. But
Yeah.
exactly like you, yeah, the more I have had a little dive into this, the more videos of tours of human composting places that I've been around on YouTube in America, the more I am thinking, yeah, I'm suspecting this might be for me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I feel the same. And I think, although it's yet to be legalized in the UK, it is currently legal and practiced in 6 states in the US. So I think it's only really a matter of time. And I know I shared a video with you, Kirsty, didn't I, at the weekend of a human composting facility in the
yeah,
US. And I just thought
fabulous.
that was, yeah, fascinating. And it just showed really, didn't it, how gentle and natural the
Yeah,
process was, and how well they'd set everything up. And the end product is literally compost that can be returned to the family, or they
yeah,
can use it on the land there to plant trees in a person's memory. So, such a little environmental impact compared to the others. Um,
absolutely. Yeah, so little that it, in fact, they say it's little to no greenhouse
yeah,
gas emission, which is just amazing, isn't it?
yeah.
I really liked it because I thought what I'd read about it previously had given me an impression that it was a much longer process than it is, and that it
Yeah.
seemed very kind of medicalized in a way. But actually, you know, we should see if we can put a link to
Yeah.
that
I
video
will
on
I
the
will look to
website,
doing
shouldn't
that.
we?
Yeah.
Yeah, have we mentioned there's a not if but when website? I don't think we
No,
actually have.
we need to
No.
mention
Well,
that,
there you
don't
go.
we?
There is.
Yes. There is a
So
website. We will
there,
we will push that more and tell you all about it so you can go and have a look,
yeah,
because you can find
yeah,
all the links to these podcasts, and we'll keep
yeah.
adding things that we find interesting onto it.
Other stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, to kind of, you know, give people some sort of idea, basically there's a facility. Actually the one that Lyndsey's referring to on this video has a chapel space where you can do the service. the body is put into almost effectively a shroud, really, isn't it? It's not put
Yeah.
into a coffin. And then it's placed into a chamber where it stays for 12 months. And then through a process of adding different natural things into that chamber, at the end of 12 months, there were bags and bags, weren't they? You actually
Yeah.
get quite a lot of compost back from it, don't
Yeah.
you?
Yeah.
That you can choose then for, as Lyndsey says, for them to use on dedicated land that they've got, or you can literally bring it home and, use it on your own garden. And I know there's a bit of a thing with people there, particularly like if you lived in a rental property, but you can do lovely things in pots and you can take them
Yeah.
with you to move,
Yeah,
can't you?
definitely. Yeah. And I
So,
think it was lovely that they were saying that during the process, that,
oh,
family were more than welcome to go and actually sit with their loved one whenever they
yes.
wanted to. That was something that, I think will be a huge pro for some people, to think that
Oh,
during that
yes.
process they can visit them and they can be there in that space.
Yeah,
And yeah,
yeah.
so
It's
I
almost
am
like,
being sold on this idea.
yeah, I am very much. Yeah, absolutely. I think it's something that I'm definitely wanting to find out more about, and also about trying to raise some awareness about, because we do need changes in the law.
Yeah.
Times have changed and we are all so much more aware now of the use of space, the use of natural resources, all of those kind of things. Just as a final point there, I mean, oh, I loved that as well, that people can go and sit next to the chamber. It's kind of like almost an extended version of Chapel Arrest, wasn't it? It's
Yeah.
beautiful. And I loved how people had put pictures and photos and little writings and like
Yeah.
literally stuck them onto the chamber. And I thought that was just really, yeah, beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there you go. Don't be scared. Let's call it terramation. Not terrormation, terramation. Um, yeah, so we're hoping that our sixth episode, we're there already, of Not If But When, will have helped you to have a bit more clarity really about those options, which you might feel fit in for you or for somebody you love when that inevitable time for disposal does arrive, as it will. We're hoping that we've helped you to further embrace the idea that whilst this shell is finite, the person is eternal.
Yeah, they most definitely are. And coming up in next week's episode is coffins. We are talking about coffins.
I love
Lots
that.
of them.
I love the change of pitch there.
Upbeat. Let's talk about coffins. And as a teaser to this summer's episode, in which we're going to take you all on a journey through this year's National Funeral Exhibition, one of
So
our favourite
exciting.
places to visit, we will have a chat about our own reactions to the reality of some of the more unusual options available. Now, you will, of course, find that episode and all previous episodes of Not If But When on Spotify. So please do tell the world around you that we are here, that we've loads of information you absolutely, definitely are going to need at some point in your one wild and precious life, and that we're going nowhere until we're all able to talk about the when.
Yep, we're here for the long haul, Linz, aren't we?
Yep.
So, welcome us back into your eardrums next week, if you can, for more informative and not at all scary chat. Until then, go forth with joy and embrace every day whilst embracing the inevitable. Bye.
Bye. Bye.